but we circled around Asia, the Middle East, and now Europe is coming into sight. And Monique Crick already gave suggestion what was happening, but now we will focus more on what is the relation between China and Europe. That is an interesting question because it's more a global adventure, as I can say. And for the Dutch, for the English, we have done a lot of research, a lot of publications, but for Portugal, they are absent in a way. It's high time that we give more attention to what the Portuguese did and how they were influential in making Europe interested in Asia, in the Far East, in China, and in porcelain. I don't know if it's coincidence or if it is on purpose that the program now has 4 speakers, all on a Portuguese subject. I think that's wonderful. And that helps a lot in telling us that there is a much variety in what the Portuguese did. What did they do? What did they buy? How did they bring it to Europe? And what kind of porcelains were in their collections and in their ships? We will start with Dr. Laura Valerie Esterhuizen. She is the retired curator of the Van Tilburg collection at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And she is the dean of shipwreck finds in South Africa. She knows everyone who is collecting shards and who is keeping the shards in their private cabinets. But she knows them. Valerie.
Good afternoon. I'm going to tell you about 11 shipwreck sites where porcelain are found, porcelain shard. So this is actually, I can say, my life's work and my hobby. Porcelain shards from shipwrecks. So when Bartholomew Diaz rounded the Cape in 1488, he opened the route to India. Vasco da Gama followed in 1497, sorry, and he engaged with his fleet in this very important, epic commercial route to India to establish the link between Europe and the East, connecting the East and the West, and this gave rise to the Carrera de India. Now, the wrecks, let me see, everything did not go so well. And you can see the map of Africa there. And I'm going to try, I can't see it nicely here, but I'm going to try, oh, wrong one. I was going to try to show you how the route, oh, that one, the route back from the east back to Lisbon, kept all along the coast, quite near the coast. So the Portuguese ships would go to Sofala, to Mozambique Island, Mozambique, and then they rounded the Cape, or many tried to round the Cape, but many did not make it. So many shipwrecks lies on this coast, and there are at least 11 sites where porcelain shards are found from shipwrecks. One site is not connected to any wreck as far as we can find out, but the rest, 10 of the shipwrecks, has a place where porcelain washes out and where porcelain can be found and which we can connect the shards with a certain wreck. But not all the wrecks are found. There are only 4 wrecks from the 10 that were found and identified and dated. So the rest is still there, waiting to be discovered. So the first and our most oldest wreck is at Fles Bay, 1506. And this is an unnamed wreck. The wreck is not found, but there are many theories, but I think the wreck's name is the Letea Nova. We are still busy with research on this wreck. There you can see the period and the intact, no, sorry, that's the wrong one. The intact shard there is from, oh, I just want to go back. Can I go back? Go back. That's one, yes. You can see the period, Chongqing period, 1488 to 1505. So the next wrecks are the 2 Jiajing wrecks, the Sao Zhao and the Sao Bintu. Now the Sao Bintu was recovered and identified, but the Sao Zhao not. But both these wrecks are from the Jiajing period, and you can see these foliated dragons are the most numerous on both the wrecks. I'd like to show you the rim shards with continuous motifs. Of course, there are a great variety of decorative motifs from these 2 wrecks. The next wreck is the Santo Alberto, some 40 years later, and this is quite a different story with the rim shards, much broader, with beautiful decorations. But I'd like to show you the lines, the vertical lines dividing these rims, and this led, the dividing line was taken right down to the centered motif, which you can see there, creating 8 panels, and this led to this beautiful deer cup, this one in Lisbon, but also some shards found on this wreck site, and just a few of the temples. And the next shards are from the Sao João Baptista, 1522, and this is what the shards look like. Many shards of the Krag style, and The next one, the São Gonçalo, 1630, and then the Santa Maria Madre de Deus. The São João, the São Gonçalo shards, this is what they look like. And suddenly there is a burst of this beautiful cobalt blue decorations. It doesn't want to go on. Oh, there it is. Just a nice molded fish, the only one. And then the Madre de Deus, quite a different story. While we saw this beautiful blue from the São Gonçalo, this Santa Maria de Deus, suddenly the blue is muted. It is a very soft, light blue, beautiful blue. These are not the best shards. Let me see, there's some more. Muted blue, and sort of, I think the term violets in milk comes to mind when you have a look at these shards. So the next is the Qing dynasty. Two more wrecks, Nossa Senhora de Atalaya de Pinheiro, Santissimo Sacramento, both 1647. These two ships sailed together, and they have more or less the same type of shards, thick shards belonging to quite large objects. And then they have this peculiar plates on board. You can see the watered down crack-style rims, and this is what the back looked like. The only wreck with these shards, the only two wrecks with these shards. Then the next shard, that's the Nossa Senhora dos Milagros of 1686. And this wreck was also, it was discovered, the load, ceramic load was removed, but the wreck has not been identified. And this is what the shards from this wreck look like. It is from the Kangxi period, much later than the others. Beautifully painted, lovely blue, a thick, shiny glaze, and brown glaze at the back. You know, all the names, Capuchin and Batavian ware, whatever. And yeah, this is the end of the story.
Thank you very much, Valerie. This is indeed a fascinating story. And we want to know more, so please continue with your research.
I wish I could show you more, but the time is so limited.
20 minutes, they told us. We will continue with the presentation by Professor Etsuko Miyata. And we don't know each other before, now we have met. But you will tell us about how these luxurious objects came with the Portuguese to the West. To you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. I'm very, very honored. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the organizers, the museum and the university, and all the researchers from all over the world. Today I will be talking about mainly the blue and white Chinese porcelain that traveled to Lisbon from 16th to 18th century, but from the excavation site. So it does include other polychrome colors and other stuffs. and they're all shards, so some may fall asleep, but just please, please enjoy. The first export Chinese porcelain to Europe in large quantity was operated, of course, by the Portuguese, who entered in the Asian market in the early 16th century and succeeded to trade spice, silk products, Asian art crafts, and Chinese porcelain in Malacca, an offshore Zhejiang province, which was a contraband trade at the first. Japanese, Chinese, and other Southeast Asian merchants around Zhejiang province traded and met them offshore and traded, which was forbidden officially from Chinese government until 1557, when they were given Macau. Okay. So this is the objective of the study. But I will keep on talking. Large number of Chinese porcelains, including blue and white, were exported to Lisbon and are now exhibited in museums, but also excavated from various archaeological sites within the city and from many other cities like Coimbra, Porto, Aveiro. This explains that Chinese blue and white porcelains were well accepted by the Portuguese market and were successfully transported to other European markets, such as Galician province in Spain and all the way to the Netherlands. The existing pieces include part of the early pieces that were exported to Europe in early 16th century. Okay, this is the map of Goa when they first entered into Asia. This is the map of Malacca in the 17th century. This is the maritime route and port cities. I think you all know by now. The existing pieces include part of the early pieces that were exported to Europe in the 16th century, and many of them were found from Alfama, the old part of the city of Lisbon, which was one of the largest entry ports of Asian goods at that time. By studying and having a close look at the early export porcelains, we are able to understand how the trade with the Chinese evolved in the course of time and how the Jingdezhen kiln production adapted to the European market. This evolution or change of Chinese porcelain types indicates the existence of Portuguese and Chinese middlemen who managed to guide the workers to produce the pieces which would fit into the European market. So, with the trade in Asia and installation in Goa and Malacca, they quickly entered into the Asian trade network. For example, when Ming Bang trade Japan due to the frequent plundering by the Japanese famous pirates, so-called wako, the Portuguese merchants played an important role as middlemen between China and Japan. The Portuguese brought Chinese silk and other products to Japan and exported Chinese silver from the Iwami mine to China. There were several Portuguese merchants acting as pepper trade middlemen in the inner India as well. So they were scattered, the Portuguese merchants were scattered to all over Asia at that time. Thus, they became part of the merchants' network in Asia from the early stage. And Macau was connected to Manila, Malacca, Ayutthaya, Nagasaki, Makassar, Phnom Penh, Cambodia, Cochin, China, Goa, and as far as to Lisbon, and also to New Spain on the other side. So, this is the early 16th century pieces. Now, several excavations within the historical area of the city show that from the moment of the Portuguese reach to Asia, probably to Malacca, they traded Chinese ceramics and brought them back to Lisbon. From the excavation in Alfama, from the early, many pieces from the early 16th centuries were found as these pieces. They were mostly large plates from Jingdezhen with qilins and lions drawn in the center with geometric designs on the rim. These types are found widely in Asia, such as the Philippines and Japan. Within these types, there is one bowl with the cross mark on the bottom. It belongs to the early 16th century, although the cross mark is not common among the Chinese wares. The same piece was found with the cross mark was found from the Penny's Bay in Hong Kong, and it has been reported by the archaeologists Wei Huan and Qing Huan in Wenwu in 2007. The cross mark most probably relates to the Catholic symbol and may be ordered by the Portuguese. From other excavation sites, many Chinese porcelains were found and date back to early 16th century. Go back. No, this is not early 16th century. Okay. Such as this piece, which is a large celadon from Lunchuan Kiln. On the exterior, there is a dragon design applied. The date is not firm enough, though it is considered to be late 15th to early 16th century. There are also fragments of plates which has phoenix design on the center. No, I don't have that. This type is present in Mexico City, Seville, and other sites, and can be dated to mid-16th century to 1670s or 80s. They're also overglazed. This is the pieces that has Jiajin marks, which is on the left hand. The Wanli pieces are commonly found in many areas, not just in Asia, but you can see in Portugal, Mexico, and then Peru. This is also possibly mid-16th century piece. This is the vase with the Jesuit escudo, also 16th century, which is probably ordered by the Portuguese. And this is the polychrome pieces, overglazed colored pieces with gold pigment. These are dated to the late 16th century to maybe they continue to produce to early 17th century, produced in Wanli period. They're commonly found in, I think, everywhere now. 17th century, this is the phoenix plate that I was referring to. Okay, the 17th century ceramics and porcelains. These are fragments of so-called crackwares that you all know. From the motifs and brushwork, it belongs to the early 17th century, since it is identical piece can be found from the Huitelo cargo. And this type is widely found in certain amount, although from Lisbon, there are very few pieces from the excavation site. However, this does not mean that Portuguese merchants did not import cracked wares. Since many cracked pieces were found from the Nossa Senhora dos Mártires, known as the pepper cargo, sunk offshore Cascais in 1605. The pieces, which date to the early half of the 17th century, is rather scarce, but some fragments of Zhangzhou Kiln, this is from the Nossa Senhora dos Mártires, the sunken ship. Okay. There are Zhangzhou pieces as well, and these belong to the early half of the 17th century, and they can be found in quite an abundance. Only the rims are found in this case, but it can be assumed as large plates. Zhangzhou wares were still circulated in all port cities in Southeast Asia and East Asia. Some may have been traded cheaper than the Jingdezhen wares, although other pieces, such as colored large plates, were bought as luxury pieces, such as the pieces we see in Princess Hof Ceramic Museum collection. This shows that there were many kilns in Zhangzhou and were able to produce several types, qualities in large amount. Within the excavation in Lisbon, notable pieces are fragments of Kakiemon plate, which is from Arita City, Kyushu, south of Japan, which began to export porcelain to Europe by the Dutch merchants from 1660s. Kakiemon porcelains are well known to be exported to Europe and gave an influence to Meissen wares of Germany. They were consistently exported to Europe until the 18th century and were popular among the high-class society, although the export declined due to the reduction of the porcelain export of the Dutch East Company and the domestic economic depression. It is not very common to find Kakiemon pieces from the excavation sites in Lisbon. At the time of 1660s, Portuguese merchants were expelled from Japan, and Japan only traded with the Dutch and the Chinese merchants. Thus, these Kakiemon pieces were most probably brought from the Dutch merchants in Java or Indonesia. Compared to Kakiemon pieces, there is no other Japanese Hizen wares to be found from the excavation sites. Hizen wares were also exported to Europe in large quantity at the time when Jingdezhen could not produce enough pieces for export due to the Civil War, as we all know. The Portuguese had access to most Asian ports and could buy Hizen wares without any difficulty. The absence of Hizen wares may indicate specific reasons, such as they were not preferred in the Portuguese market or were dominated by the Dutch merchants, or simply did not have direct access. In either case, further study must be carried out to clarify this absence. Another piece that stands out is blue and white, so-called the transitional ware. This type was produced during the late Ming and early Qing, around 1620s to 1683. The piece was found from Lisbon City, from Alfama again, which is a vase, a cylindrical form with butterfly and flower motif. This could be a part of roll wagon, a tall vase exported to the Netherlands in large quantity. There are a large group of fragments which all belong to the same type. They're blue and white bowls with birds, with twigs, and the moon drawn on the exterior, defining from the motifs which resemble to the crow cup design. It may fall into some point around mid-17th century until the latter half of the century. This is also the kanshi pieces that I found. And these pieces are quite popular among the excavation pieces. Now, 3 teacups were also found, which 2 of them have a handle. They could have been used as coffee cups or teacups. The one without the handle is earlier than the others with floral design on the exterior. The brown cup, so-called the Batavian ware, is scarce from the excavations. The other white cup is probably produced in Dehua, the one on the left, Dehua Kiln, since the clay seems very soft. The Portuguese were the first European to import Chinese tea in certain quantity. But then eventually the Portuguese had habit to drink coffee owing to their success in the Brazilian plantation of coffee. Other pieces belong to the 18th century, blue and white plates, this one, from the brushwork and the cobalt, it seems to be from the Jingdezhen, although some can be from kilns in Guangdong or other area. They seem to be molded, and the bottom cut is quite sharp. So, the 19th century and 20th century, there are no porcelains from the excavation sites. However, there are plenty of pieces of this period in museum collections. The lack of Chinese porcelain from this period from the excavation sites might indicate the reduction of trade by the Portuguese. The trade network between Macau and Lisbon never ceased, but the Chinese porcelain might have imported and bought exclusively by the limited wealthy people throughout the country, and thus the overglazed colored so-called famille rose from the 19th and 20th century concentrates in museums and private collection or monasteries and convents. So, the 16th century until the excavated porcelain from the historical area of Lisbon contains various pieces from the early 16th century until the third quarter of the century. This was the period when the Portuguese were most active in the Asian trade, and many ships went in and out between major port cities in Asia mentioned above. With these products, porcelains brought to Lisbon in large quantity were sold in Portugal and also to other European countries. At the same time, Mediterranean trade network functioned with the revival of Indian merchant trade and the Italian trade network, and peppers and other Asian goods trade, together with the Chinese porcelains, reached to Barcelona. However, considering the limited amount of Chinese porcelain within Spain during this period, Portuguese trade in Africa via Africa was much more prosperous and was carried out in large scale. Macau was one of the large entrances to the Chinese market, and even the Spanish galleons came all the way from New Spain to trade in Macau, which was banned by the Spanish king afterwards. The Spanish archives show that the Portuguese in Macau also sent naos to New Spain and further to Peru to sell Asian goods. Such was the prosperity of Asian goods trade, it is natural to find many pieces of this period within the city. Since Macau sent several ships annually to Manila, the peak of prosperity of Macau trade may be linked more or less to the Manila galleon trade, which was the end of 16th century to the first half of the 17th century, although by the 1580s, the Dutch power little by little took over the Portuguese role in the Asian trade with Europe. The slight scarcity of excavated porcelain in the early half of the 17th century possibly indicate the decrease of trade goods handled by the Portuguese or the slow decline of Portuguese power in Asia. However, even after the establishment of Batavia by the VOC in 1619, Macau was a close trade partner to the Dutch and sent many ships to Batavia, coexisting with the Fujianese merchants. Thus, the decline of Portuguese power could have been something temporary. That is why their Chinese porcelain and Caquiamon porcelains of the latter half of the century exist. Macau still functioned as one of the major port cities in Asia. After that, the presence of the 18th century, 19th century pieces, 17th century, and 18th century pieces supports this theory. The total lack of 19th and 20th century pieces in Lisbon points out that the Chinese porcelains were exclusively sold to the wealthy aristocrats and religious organizations. Porcelain may have become a product, a very popular product, which people used for tablewares. Possibly the porcelain trade by the Portuguese shifted to other goods, such as opium trade in the 19th and 20th century, as a mean to compete with other European power. Since there are archives in Macau of Rogerio family competing with the Jardine and Matheson Scottish Company with the opium trade. Chinese porcelain from various kilns changed motifs from time to time, aiming the European market, and therefore they must have been middlemen giving orders and advice to the producers in China, but it could have been either the Dutch or the Chinese merchants as well. For the further study, we must carry out quantitative study of excavated pieces and also a close comparative study with the heirloom pieces in museums and maybe with private collections. Thank you very much.
We will continue with our fourth speaker, Teresa. We know each other in a way, and you like shards, like we all do. But I'm very interested to hear your story about the convent and the shards found there. Please.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real pleasure to be here, participated in the second conference of the Society of International Ceramic Studies. Today, I will be talking about the porcelain from the Ming Dynasty recovered from the monastery of Santa Clara Vella in Coimbra. The monastery of Santa Clara Vella is situated on the southern bank of the Mondego River in Coimbra, central Portugal. Founded in the 13th century, this female monastery, established for the order of the Poor Clares, remained occupied until the late 17th century. Pier Maria Baldi's illustration depicts the monastery only 8 years before its abandonment in 1677. Despite being declared a National Heritage Monument in 1910, Santa Clara Vella had long suffered severe degradation due to recurrent flooding from the Mondego, which rendered it uninhabitable and forced the nuns' relocation to the newly built Santa Clara Nova on higher ground. After abandonment, the site deteriorated further and was eventually used as a dumping area. Between 1995 and 1999, archaeological excavations uncovered major architectural remains, including the lower floor of the church and main cloister, which yielded a wide array of artifacts illuminating the daily life of the Poor Clare community. Among thousands of recovered ceramics, mostly locally produced, were significant imports from Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, and China. Over 7,000 fragments of Chinese porcelain, primarily blue and white from the mid to late Ming Dynasty, represent more than 2,000 objects, the largest such assemblage yet found in Portugal. The assemblage is dominated by dishes, plates, and bowls, with a few bottles, cover boxes, candy, and teapots. This paper presents preliminary findings from the research project From China to Coimbra, Portugal, Chinese porcelain from the monastery Santa Clara Vella, conducted in collaboration with Portuguese archaeologists Tânia Manuel Casimiro and Ricardo Costeira da Silva. The porcelain predominantly dates from the Hunshi to Chongjian reigns, with a particular concentration of pieces from the Jiajing and Wanli periods. The paper focuses on blue and white porcelain produced in private kilns and Jingdezhen between the Zhengde to Wanli reigns, examining patterns of consumption in Portugal during the 16th and early 17th centuries, and the cultural, symbolic, and functional roles of these objects within the cloister life of the Poor Clare nuns, bound by vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity. This paper further seeks to situate the Santa Clara porcelains within their broader historical context, both within Renaissance Europe and in relation to the production place in China. Portuguese maritime expansion in the late 15th century established sea routes to Asia with Vasco da Gama's 1499 return voyage introducing Chinese porcelain to the royal court. Only a few fragments from Santa Clara, however, can be associated with this initial phase. Fragments of 5 pieces dated to the Hongxi reign form part of thickly potted dishes. 2 saucer dish fragments feature peony scrolls with loosely rendered blooms and dense foliage, closely comparable to an example in the British Museum in London, and a bowl in the Shanghai Museum. Saucer dishes with similar decoration were produced at the Luo Machao Kiln, located south of the Imperial Kiln complex in Chusan. Dish fragments with everted rims and stylized flower scrolls resemble those seen on a dish recovered from the Santa Cruz shipwreck, an Asian merchant vessel that sank off northwest Zambales, Luzon in the late 15th century. The decoration of another dish fragment shows affinities with pieces from the Lena Shoals shipwreck, a Chinese junk that sank off the northeastern coast of Palawan around 1490. Comparable dishes have likewise been excavated at Luo Machao Kiln, confirming its role in the production of these mid-Ming export porcelains. The establishment of Portuguese trading ports at Hormuz in 1507, Goa in 1509, and Malacca in 1511 facilitated regular importation of Chinese porcelain into Portugal. Direct trade with China commenced in 1513 during the Gender reign, with Jorge Alvarez arrived at Nian Canton, present-day Guangzhou. Shortly thereafter, Lisbon emerged as Europe's principal hub for Asian luxury goods. Dishes of this type were produced during the Gender to Judging reigns and imported into Portugal in the early to mid-16th century, as evidenced by a fragment found near Vicicaba, South Africa, from the presumed wreck site of the Portuguese carrack Sao Bento, which sank in 1554 on its return voyage from Asia. Additional fragments from refuse-filled pits at Lago do Coreto in Carnide, the Aljuve Ecclesiastical Prison and Largo do Terreiro de Trigo attest to the distribution in Lisbon. Comparable material from the San Isidro site in León, northern Spain, indicates the broader circulation of these dishes across the Iberian Peninsula during the 16th century. Following the establishment of Macau in 1557, porcelain imports into Portugal increased substantially. The Santa Clara assemblage, particularly rich in Judging and Wanli period porcelains, reflects an unprecedented level of access to global luxury goods within a monastic context, evidenced by both the quantity and diversity of objects recovered. A notable Judging period example is a Kinrande bowl of exceptional quality, combining underglazed blue interior decoration with overlaid red and traces of gold on the exterior, bearing a 6-character Judging reign mark. Its form and the cross-hatch diaper border closely parallel several blue and white bowls recovered from the Espadarte, a Portuguese carrack that sank in 1558 off the island of Mozambique, a key port between Goa and Lisbon. Fragments of bowls with underglazed blue and red overglazed enamel decoration bearing a Judging 6-character reign mark had been excavated at the Imperial Kiln site. Kinrande stain bowls with this decorative scheme were also produced for the Imperial court. Only a limited number of Kinrande porcelains reached Europe in the 16th century. The rarity of this bowl and its imperial association underscore the high value accorded to such objects, even within a community devoted to ascetic ideals. Replays of the type excavated from Santa Clara, dating to the Judging reign and inscribed with apocryphal 6-character reign marks or 4-character coin marks, were fired at the Dajanon Kiln. Several Judging period porcelains from Santa Clara correspond to examples recovered from the Espadarte shipwreck. The importation of plates of this type into Portugal is further evidenced by fragments from Lago do Coreto in Carnire, Lisbon. Another plate fragment from Santa Clara, distinguished by a whiter body and more refined decoration, shows particularly close parallels with several espadarte examples. Molded saucer dishes with borders of auspicious symbols and florets within petal panels of this type were produced at the Wainge kiln. Their circulation to Portugal by the mid-16th century is attested by 13 espadarte examples exhibiting minor decorative variations, as well as by a fragment excavated in Lagos, Algarve. This Jingdezhen period bowl, another fine example from Santa Clara, is decorated with scrolls of lotus and 4-petal flowers with slender stems, stylistically comparable to the bordered motif below the rim of a bowl from the espadarte. Fragments of bowl with slightly everted sides depicting 4 blossoming potted plants similar to espadarte examples were also identified. A fragment of one such bowl was recovered from the former Aljube prison in Lisbon. Bowls with slightly everted rims decorated with lotus scrolls and crosshatch diaper borders, such as those from Santa Clara, circulated widely across Europe and the Near East during the latter half of the 16th century. This distribution is evidenced by a fragment recovered from a cesspit in Murcia, Spain, and by intact example in the Chinese porcelain collection of the Ottoman sultans at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Small cups of this type decorated with 1 or 2 bears perched on opposing branches were mass-produced for export at the Luo Machao kiln. Their importation into Portugal in the mid-16th century is evidenced by over 100 examples recovered from the espadarte. This saucer dish fragment, together with a related dish in the Santos Palace in Lisbon, decorated with fish and aquatic plants against a net pattern ground within a Rui head border, and 3 comparable examples in the Topkapi Palace, attest to the circulation of dishes featuring this distinctive fish design through trade networks extended to Portugal and the Near East. These 2 saucer dishes feature a central medallion and a band of stylized lotus scrolls and wave motifs in underglazed blue within a white cavetto. The left hand example includes a border molded of egrets and lotus flowers, comparable to the Rui head border of a saucer dish from the espadarte, suggesting a Jingdezhen period date. Dishes dated to the Judging Wanli periods, decorated with waterside landscapes within a white cavetto and a border of herons among lotuses, circulated widely across Europe. A fragment from Santa Clara and an intact example in the Santos Palace attest to the importation into Portugal. A closely related dish depicting a landscape with figures formerly in Durley House, Lincolnshire, is now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and is fitted with English silver gilt mounts dated to circa 1585. A comparable mounted dish appears in a painting by the Dutch artist Willem Kauf of around 1660. Collectively, these examples underscore the high esteem accorded to such dishes in Europe from the late 16th to the mid-17th century. Plates of this type, decorated with a phoenix in profile within a white cavetto and a border of peach sprays and auspicious symbols, were produced from around 1570 onwards. Comparable fragments have been excavated from the Chivachao kiln site. Such plates produced in varying qualities circulated widely across Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Americas. In Portugal, intact examples are preserved in the Santos Palace, while fragments have been excavated at the Carbo convent in Lisbon and in Lagos. A diverse range of Wanli period porcelain was excavated from Santa Clara, including dishes with this distinctive geometric and floral borders. A fragment of a similar dish was also excavated at Rua Serva Pinto in Lisbon. The assemblage of mass-produced cracked porcelains varying in form, decoration, and quality is notably extensive. A thinly potted plate of this type with a molded panel border of flower and peach branches divided by double lines is in the Santos Palace. Such plates were produced at the Chivachao Kiln, and then importation into Portugal in the late 16th century is attested by fragments from the Santo Alberto, a Portuguese shipwreck that sank off Sunrise on Sea, South Africa in 1593. Another plate with a related border and naturalistic scene excavated at the former convent of Santana in Lisbon further confirms the presence of such porcelains in Portuguese female religious contexts. Dishes dated from circa 1590-1610 include examples with molded bracket lobe panels reserved on a blue wash. Variants of this type were produced at both the Wainge and Luo Machao kilns and circulated widely across the Iberian Peninsula around 1600. As attested by examples recovered from the Spanish shipwreck Santa Margarita, which sank in the Northern Mariana Islands in 1601. These plates with alternated wide and narrow panels closely parallel examples recovered from the Portuguese shipwreck Nossa Senhora dos Mártires that sank at the mouth of the Tagus River, Lisbon in 1606. Saucer dishes with a naturalistic scene within a wide cavetto and rim molded with overlapping arches of facets were produced in circa 1590-1615. Sometimes the facets were outlined in blue with blue centers, as seen in a fragment from the Chivachao Kiln, while another was recovered from the Santo Alberto. Other saucer dishes of this date featured teardrop-shaped panels on the cavetto and rim. Produced at the Wainge Kiln, such saucer dishes have been recovered from Portuguese and Spanish shipwrecks of the late 16th century, and a painting dated 1636 confirms their importation into the Spanish-ruled southern Netherlands. One-Li period plates from Santa Clara include examples of relatively low quality dating to the late 16th, early 17th century. Comparable plates of varying quality are found in the Santos Palace. Fine quality plates with related decorations, such as that in the British Museum, were produced at the Chivachao Kiln. Plates featuring a central motif, possibly a tassel purse, within a pendant ruby head border were produced at the Chivachao Kiln in the late 16th century. Their circulation in the Iberia Peninsula is further evidenced by an intact example in the Santos Palace and a fragment from León, northern Spain. These fragments form part of a cracked bowl dating to circa 1580-1595, with panels enclosed spotted deer standing in front of blue Taihu rocks. Bowls with this decoration, which vary considerably in quality, were produced at the Chivachao and Daijanon kilns. Such bowls were imported into Europe and the Spanish colonies in the Americas, as evidenced by an example fitted with English silver gilt mount of circa 1575-85 in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and examples recovered from the Spanish shipwreck Santa Margarita. Lastly, this bowl represents a noteworthy One-Li example with panels molded in low relief. Its densely arranged decoration consists of alternating panels featuring hair cartouches on patterned grounds and plants and birds. Bowls of this form and comparable decoration were exported to the Middle East, as evidenced by an example from the Ardabil Shrine in Iran, where Shah Abbas placed his porcelain collection in 1611. In conclusion, the majority of the blue and white porcelain recovered from Santa Clara dates to the 16th century and aligns stylistically with export porcelains for markets in Southeast Asia, the Near and Middle East, and Europe. The assemblage of over 2,000 objects indicates that the poor Clare nuns, despite their vows of poverty, lived within a materially privileged monastic environment comparable to other Portuguese female religious houses, with access to imported Chinese porcelain, some of exceptional quality. The predominance of dishes, plates, and bowls suggests primarily utilitarian use, likely as tableware. Although the mechanism by which these porcelains entered the monastery remain uncertain, it was common in Portugal for unmarried women of noble families to enter convents that benefited from aristocratic and royal patronage. Portuguese archaeologists involved in the project proposed that the porcelains may have been brought by the nuns upon their entry or donating through wills. Further study of the assemblage combined with archival research is needed to elucidate patterns of acquisition and use. Thank you very much for your attention.